morning, everybody. Welcome to A Different Perspective. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn. I'm so excited that you are here with us today on this beautiful, beautiful morning here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Very excited to talk to you about a subject that is extremely emotional. First of all, let me say this and be very clear on this. I feel very sorry and very sympathetic for people that have had or currently have people that suffer from the condition I'm going to go over with. Because Alzheimer's is such an emotional thing, because you see loved ones that you're with your whole life kind of disappear right in front of you, even though they may still be present. Because it's such a, having experience with this clinically and seeing people go through this, I would just want to say right now that as I go through this topic, understand my heart bleeds for you guys that are dealing with this, because maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your father, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's just some loved one, maybe it's your spouse. You know, watching this, thing continue and progress, it's my heart goes out to you guys, because, and then eventually dying from it. It's a slow process, and therefore, guess what you guys go through is quite devastating. So first of all, let me just say I understand it. I see this, and I'm hoping to shed some light on a different perspective of this, because I know a lot of people come to me and say, Doc, my mother and my family members passed away from Alzheimer's. It was absolutely devastating. What can I do? And some of the things I'm going to say today, I have to say because it's kind of frustrating. We have very little advancement when it comes to our current medical system with this condition. And that's just not me saying that. That's actually Alzheimer's Association, that's research on it. That's the current medical practice of it. They're not seeing a lot of change with things that way. And I'm going to kind of throw some monkey wrenches into some of the things that they're talking about. Not that I'm saying that we shouldn't research it. We should research it heavily. It's just that we keep on approaching it the same way. And if we don't have a different perspective on it, I actually, no joke. I always like to see all the medical perspectives, and I watched a TED Talk on this on the way in this morning. And it was interesting because the doc was just talking about we are just going to try to have preventative medications for this. Well, if that's the greatest thing that we're spending millions of dollars on research on, I'm sorry to say, it's a perspective that I don't want to see, because we are trying to create preventative medications, and there's massive negative side effects to those things. So I'm going to hopefully shed some light on this. And the reason why I want to say I'm sympathetic to the people that are going through this, I'm going to say some things that are downright controversial today. But please do me a favor. Hang in my thought process, my perspective on this till the end. And I believe, for example, that you will actually get a perspective that might trigger some things in your brain. That's something you may want to do right now. If you're 20, 30, 40, 50, right now, that can actually lead to better clinical results later in life. Because I'm going to go through some things. I'm going to use the most popular organization and actually kind of discuss some things back and forth with you to show these things. So as I pull up my talk here, what I'm going to do is this, is I'm going to walk through in great detail all of these things. So let me see, as we have here, okay? So let's start. Let's kind of look at what's said out there about Alzheimer's and give a little more different perspective on it. So the Alzheimer's Association, what is it? Okay. Now, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, any of the neurological conditions lead to dementia. All right, dementia, once again, is what you really see out of the process, but all the neurodegenerative, all the brain degenerative, all the neurological degenerative conditions lead to actually dementia. Now, Alzheimer's, so we're going to pull up from the Alzheimer's Association. What is it? Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. See, dementia is where you see the memory, the thinking, the behavior, the cognition, the mood, the whole aspect of change. That's dementia. Alzheimer's actually is about, they say, roughly 60 to 80% of all dementia type things. That is the start of what's going on with it that way. Now, symptoms usually develop slowly and get worse over time, becoming severe enough to interfere with daily tasks. Yes, we see this. Now, once again, just forgetting where your keys are isn't really a sign of dementia. Now, putting your keys in the refrigerator kind of is. And that has happened. I've actually heard that multiple times. They put it where it didn't belong, all right? Now, when you look at it, it causes problems with memory, thinking, behavior, decision-making, okay? I've actually seen clinical things where I've had patients drive to a different area and then end up somewhere and didn't know where they were, okay? Just some little bit of forgetfulness. Once again, I know a lot of people start to fear, say, man, I'm forgetting certain things. No, once again, there's things that happen just by having excitation of the brain that actually can cause that. But what happens is it doesn't mean that there is a clinical problem leading to dementia. But Alzheimer's is a slow degenerative condition, all right? Now, if you look, for example, they talk about understanding Alzheimer's, symptoms, change in brain, plaques and tangles, and this is one of the most common thing they talk about the most. And I'm going to kind of give you an idea what it is, but they talk massively. The whole basis of medication and treatment in every form when it comes to Alzheimer's is you will see plaquing and tangles. And that's why when they look at treating it, guess what happens? This is the major hyper-focus, including plaques. You look at the medications that they're dealing with, and you even look at their treatments medically, it's all to do with plaques and tangles. Now, if we are continually, now here's what happens. If we keep on doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it's kind of crazy. Why? Because that's what the thing has been focused on this whole process. You keep on talking about the same things, but then what happens is, I'm going to throw a little monkey wrench into that as new research still continues to come out about it that way. So let's kind of click on and let's look at what they talk about understanding Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Memory loss and cognition very seriously interfere with their daily life. Alzheimer's accounts for, once again, 60 to 80% of dementia cases, all right? I love this part. This is the one condition. This is the one condition I absolutely love what they say on a medical website. Do you know why? Because they always talk about everything is a normal part of aging. That's not true. And I love how, for example, says right here, Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. The known risk factor, obviously, people over 65, but there's hundreds of thousands of people under 65 that are developing it. And what they're finding out statistically, just like diabetes, let me give you an example. It's interesting. Let's go back to not too long ago. When I was first in practice, type 2 diabetes was called what? Mark, do you remember what it's called?
Early onset.
Yep, that's right, adult onset. Okay, great job, Mark. You got it right. Now, because Mark and I, we're in our, 40s and stuff like that, so we're the kind of older crew here. But you know something is this? If you were 20 years old right now, you didn't know that diabetes back then was called adult onset. Now, infants have type 2 diabetes. Infants, all right? Now, think about this. With Alzheimer's, there has been a degression age. It used to be known as an elderly-based age. Now it's starting to work its way backwards. I have actually seen clinically somebody in their 20s start to develop symptoms just like a person that could have been 70. It's progressively working its way back down. Why? Because we're getting sicker as a culture. And see, so I love the fact that they actually say on this, Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It's a brain degenerative process. Alzheimer's worsens over time. Well, think about that. If it worsens, I mean this sincerely, if it worsens, that means it can get better. Let me say it again. If it degenerates and worsens, that means it can regenerate. Do you understand that every part of your body is regenerative? Every part. If you cut your finger, it regenerates. Well, doc, I'm 90 years old. Good, cut your finger. See, it's just that, once again, because we don't have that perspective, we just see something go down a bad path. That's no different that so many times when people say this. This is very common in most female hormone problems, especially leading to cancer. If somebody has a cyst, okay, on the ovary, a lot of doctors will tell women, say, listen, that cyst, if not dealt with, will get to cancer. And their idea of dealt with is either removal or some hormone blocking medication. And they said, and if you don't do this, it's going to end up with cancer. I totally agree. I said, doc, what do you mean totally agree? If you are under their care and continue and they don't know how to reverse that process, you're going to end up probably with cancer. So therefore, the medical treatments that they give to you, once again, are the only thing that they can have their perspective on, and they can tell you it's leading to cancer. and I can't see anything else. So that's why when they talk about these things, they're looking at the plaquing and tangles and the degenerative aspects of it that way, and they're just trying to treat it. They can't see anything else. They don't look at the regenerative processes that way. So now, Alzheimer's has no current cure, but treatments of symptoms are available and research continues. Yet they talk about it. They talk about even their current form of treatment does not stop, does not even come close to even really slowing the degression down. It doesn't. Yet we've spent billions. Yet we donate billions of dollars to this process. It needs to think differently about it. Now, if you actually click on the page itself, it talks about medications for memory. They talk about 2 major medications dealing with plaquing and tangling, all right? Now, treatment behaviors, they go through all this. But then I found this interesting. Alternative treatments. I was like, okay. For once, actually, I saw a little bit of change on their perspective of it and going, okay, listen, what are they showing there? We're going to get that to just a little bit. Now, but I do want to show you is let's kind of step back and kind of look at what does plaquing mean? What does tangling mean? All right? And I'll give you some representations, but in order to know this, you have to actually, oh, I apologize, it seems a little bit blurry, so it's not your screen, it's mine, I apologize for that. But what happens is look at neurons, nerves, okay? Think of it this way, nerve cells. Your brain is just billions upon billions of nerve cells connected into an organ, and that's called the brain. All right, but you have the body and nucleus, and you have these nice little axons, and what does it attaches to another nerve, okay? But how nerves, there's a space in between, how nerves actually do is actually connect by synapses. What's a synapse? It's a little gap to where our chemical exchange happens, neurotransmitters, and actually it relays messages. Now the one thing about this, on that nice little tail, that axon, there's a covering on there that's called the myelin sheath. It protects the nerve. It actually deals with what? It deals with the conductivity and how fast the nerve actually works. And if there's any damage to that, if there's any degeneration of there is your neurodegenerative effects. And it can turn out to be MS. It can turn out to be pain. It could turn out to be Alzheimer's. It could turn out to be Parkinson's. See, how they actually classify neurodegenerative diseases isn't really honestly based on diagnostics. It's based on symptomatology. The difference between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, believe it or not, that's why they're kind of classified in the same category. There isn't much difference. It's just that there is intention tremors when they're shaking compared to focus and memory and cognition. But what happens is the degenerative effects are exactly the same. That's why when you start to look at neuronal regeneration, you can actually see some of these things blanket across the board getting better. Well, doc, you tell me that there can be a change in Parkinson's. You tell me that there can be a change in MS. Yes, I am. And I'm going to actually walk you through that, okay? And I've seen it clinically. Now, what do I mean by that? I can give you a ton of names to give you an example. It's easy to see this reaction that if a person has tremors from Parkinson's, as you start to regenerate that part of the nerves, that you can see some clinical outcome difference. And it's blown doctors away when that has happened. I'll show you why that happens, and I'll show you what you can do. So that's why when I talk about the aspects, even they talk about alternative treatments on there, I'm actually happy what they actually put on there. But they gave it from a medical perspective. They gave it trying to talk about, well, here's a trial here and a trial here. No, what actually really happens. So understand that there's a chemical actual barrier there with our neurotransmitters, but there's also, if there's degeneration or destruction or death of the neurons, man, if your brain's dying, that's why I don't do this much, but there is actually a doc that I have huge respect for, who to me probably has more brain experience and stuff that I've personally learned from. I actually want you guys to look him up. It's Dr. Amen. Okay, he's actually probably, no, I will say he is by far the brain expert of the world. He's absolutely incredible. And so when I actually have studied his stuff massively that way, I can tell you, and I've adapted some of the things. Now remember, he's still medical that way, so I kind of have a little different perspective on it just that way, but we're pretty spot on to what he's talking about all the time, and he's done well over hundreds of thousands of brain scans that way. And when they look at Alzheimer's itself or any neurological degenerative disease, the brain's shrinking. It's actually shrinking. These things are dying. These things are dying. Well, I'm sitting there going, well, what's causing them to die? And they always say it's unknown. Well, it's actually not that unknown. What they mean is it's unknown how they can treat it. So therefore, guess what they're going to do? They're always going to try to modify things, okay? So understanding, just a couple nerves. Now remember, there's billions of these in there. And they're wrong. They actually do this, and I'm actually going to pull up a slide of a person that died from Alzheimer's, and they did a cross-section of that, and they saw plaquing in there. And they say, go, doc, look at that, look at what happened. They can even show that that's there. They can even say, listen, there's plaquing in it. We actually have diagnostic evidence of it. Well, this is where, for example, when you're always looking at end responses, you can definitely come to very different conclusions, all right? Because let me ask you a question. That plaquing that's there, does it lead to Alzheimer's? Actually, maybe the plaquing has no effect on it that way. Maybe they just, it's like this. I know it sounds dumb, but let me give you a dumb example. Let's say there was a bank robber that always, rode a white horse to rob banks. Does that mean every horse that's evident there is actually involved in some sort of robbery? I know it's a dumb example, but it's the only thing I can off the top of my head right now. But the idea is this, is they're trying to make an association. Now you say, well, doc, but no, all the major researchers, okay, that's fine. It's like, here's what happens. If I tell somebody something, what happens is, and they try to clinically make it make sense that way, they will start thinking that way. You got to go beyond that, because here's what happens. We've been addressing plaque and tangles, where tangles, for example, I apologize, let me go back here. Tangles, for example, are where the axons traveling down nerve, it's like a railroad track, and the cart gets off, all the tracks start to cross. Okay, so how things travel down a nerve are not working right. It's slower, it doesn't move as fast. So therefore, that's why they call them tangles. They actually, instead of tracks being down this way, they intertwine, and of course the nerve function is actually affected. All right, so that's why when they look at these things, I would tell people, keep looking at the clinical results. See, a lot of people say, well, doc, what research? No. They got all the research and they're trying to prove tangles and plaquing, but we spent billions. I'm talking billions. And let me say it again, billions. And it's constantly getting worse. It's constantly getting worse like crazy, yet we've made a fraction of a step of what's going on that way. A fraction. So what's going to happen 10 years from now? If we're still on a fraction of advancement, still looking at these things, we got to go at it differently. But you know something? Some scientists did go at it differently. And this never made CNN. This never made Fox News. This never did mainstream media. But it's called the Nun Study. And there's several like this, but this was a long-term study. And no joke, it's actually nuns. You can read it in the American College of Neurology. It's a great, what they did, there was nuns, for example, that they studied for 20 years. 20 years, okay? That they were actually looking at cognition, they were looking at memory and thinking. They looked at all these women and they studied them over the course of a time. And then what they did is all the nuns donated their brain to science. They said, listen, we want you to study our brains and see what they found. Do you know, as you read the article, every one of them had plaquing and tangling. Every one of them. Every one of them, actually, they found out, had a significant amount of plaquing in their brain. Yet, actually, they thrived cognitively. They had no memory decline. They actually had a lot of things. Now, they do have some theories of why that happened, but the idea is this. So if you're just talking, here's plaquing, here's the result of it, here's tangling, well, actually, these women had it too. They died, most of them died in their 80s and 90s, and they had plaquing, a significant amount. They even talked about one woman had such a significant amount, they couldn't understand how she was even functioning. So it's a great study if you read the whole thing. No joke, they did a great detailed study for 20 plus years on this. And they dissected their brains. They looked at their neurological aspect, and they didn't suffer from what a lot of people today suffer with that have sometimes even less plaquing than these women did during the Nun Study. So it's just something to look at that way. So I said, that's why I let a light bulb moment. I'm like, if we keep on looking at these things over and over, and we say, yes, there's plaque, but how many people have plaque and never have Alzheimer's? How many people have plaque and tangles and never actually have degenerative neurological diseases that way? These women lived significantly into their 80s and 90s, thriving mentally. Memory, cognition, conversation, everything, okay? But the thing is this, so there has to be that, I was sitting there going, we can't be so microscopic on the look and not take a macro view of this. And so I started to say, let's do this. Let's go back to their website. And let's go back to say, listen, what were the alternative treatments? Why are they listing on there? And is there anything to back those at all? So I popped it up, and actually you click on it. Remember, you can go right to their website and actually go along with me on this, all right? So all of a sudden I'm like, all right, okay, let's take a look. And I do find this funny. I really do find this funny, okay? Medications, regardless if they save your life or if they're even helping you, have major negative side effects. Who said so? The people who made the medication. What's the first thing that they list here? Concerns about alternative therapies. And what they always say is, well, they're not well researched. Guys, the chance of most alternative therapies to have a chronic effect on you that can lead to death is very rare. It really is. I'm not saying it can't happen. Actually, the funny part is the reason why alternative therapies actually can be detrimental to you is because you're taking some medication. Let me give you an example. You take a medication and you actually take St. John's wort, you can clear that medication out and there can be a problem, okay? That's not the alternative problem. That's actually the medication that you're dealing with that way. But I do love how they are like, okay, here we go. Now, it's really funny though. Okay, if you look about it this way, they call medical foods. A growing number of herbal and dietary supplements and medical foods are promoted as memory enhancers or treatments to delay or prevent Alzheimer's disease or dementias. Actually, that's pretty darn good. I like that definition, guys. I can honestly tell you, this is, out of all the medical websites, this is my favorite. It's actually my favorite because I can't really find much that I disagree with them on how they present things. Now you say, Doc, you just talked about tangles and plaque. No. At least they present and say, here's the best that we can find. This is not normal. They're not blaming it on genes. They're not blaming it on things that you have no control over. They're saying, this is not normal. It's getting worse. There could be some things that are actually promote memory and enhance and regenerative that way. And I'm like, what if we could enhance brain development and function? And that's where Dr. Amen has done a wonderful job. I encourage you to check him out. He's done a fantastic job on that, on brain health that way. But it's kind of neat. I'm like, these are the things that we need to start. But here's the one thing about degeneration. Degeneration actually requires regeneration. If I cut my finger, the regenerative aspect happens very quickly. Neurological regeneration takes a significant amount of time. It takes a significant amount of time, but it also makes sure that you're not causing any degenerative effects. So I'm going to get into not only some of the regenerative effects, I'm also going to show some of the things that cause brain degeneration. And so what it's about, it's almost like having a scale. You have to have more regenerative effects than degenerative effects. Most people are flipping the scale of high degenerative effects, and even if they're doing a little bit of regenerative effects, the amount of degeneration is overtaking, and that's what's happening today. We live a lifestyle. That has caused massive degeneration to our neurological system, to our brain, and nobody's talking about the great regenerative effects, so therefore the scales have tipped, and that's why, just like type 2 diabetes, it started out as an old person's condition, and now it's working its way down. I wonder if there's a relationship between diabetes and Alzheimer's. Let's take a look. So now, where do we start? So I was actually reading through these, and I'm very familiar and actually work with all these, in all wellness plays, work with all these ingredients. But there's one I do want to talk about that I think would be of great interest to you, phosphatidylserine. Okay, Doc, what is it? Okay, it's a lipid. It's actually, remember we talked about that good old covering of a nerve? So for example, let's even just go to MS. Once again, let me say this, and I told you I'm going to talk about some things that are somewhat a little bit, not controversial, but they may emotionally make you upset. Do you understand that there is no diagnosis for MS? Let me say that again. So that's why when your doc tells you that there's, that there's plaquing and this on an MRI and things like that, and that's why you have MS, that's not really true. That's actually a very false assumption. They were just saying, I see some brain plaquing, so there could be some, that's MS. Well, go back to the Nun study. They had major plaquing, and there was no MS or any condition that way, neurologically that way. Actually, most of them died from heart condition. They did. Actually, most of them actually died from heart, and a couple died from cancer, okay? Now, so therefore, once again, when you look at MS, there is one thing that they do know post-death in cadaver, that they actually study the myelin sheath. The actually regeneration of that nerve didn't happen, and it degenerated, and now the actual action potential, the flow of that electricity decreased, and that's why MS developed. So they do understand that, but to say that came from plaquing in the brain or actually an MRI is misleading. It's actually a lie to people. They can say, I see some plaquing and things like that, so I maybe assume that might be some of the contributors, but MS is only based on one thing. Let me give you the criteria. They look for everything possible and you still have neurological symptoms, so it has to be MS. It has to be MS. Now, let me say something also very, very upsetting to people when I say this. But all I ask you to do is prove me wrong. Okay, just like we talked about, nerves are very slowly regenerative. So a person will come to me and they'll say, Doc, I've had MS for 17 years. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. It's almost virtually physically impossible. Because let me explain. If you're on a degenerative neurodegenerative process, just like MS, what they see, because they don't know how to regenerate, what they do is they decline. They may decline slow, but what happens is this. I'll say, all right, Miss Jones, you've had this for 17 years. Have you had bad days every day for 17 years? Well, no, Doc. Sometimes I have good days. Sometimes I have bad days. Well, then guess what happens? Then you don't have MS. I'm not saying you don't have any neurological irritation. I'm not saying you don't have a problem. I'm saying that your nerves can't regenerate daily. So you can't have a good day and can't have a bad day. Can't have a good day, can't have a bad day. Because it takes a significant amount of time for any regeneration. Now, if you were diagnosed with MS and you saw some slow progression or some slow degeneration, I can agree with that, just even by symptoms. But you can't tell me that you've had good and bad days for 17 years because nerves do not regenerate that fast. And I know some of you guys say, no, Doc, my doctor told me, yeah, okay, good. Show me his diagnostic criteria. That doesn't match up. And yes, I know you're suffering. And the reason why you actually emotionally didn't like what I just said is because you attached your condition and now you have something that's now not unknown, so you have less fear. Oh, I got MS. Well, like I said, if you truly have MS, you're just like Alzheimer's and you're not doing anything regenerative, you are going to degenerate slow. There is no good and bad days. So I know some of you guys may be emotionally upset that I said that, but we need to stop misleading people in the thought process. I've had people say, Doc, I have MS and I have 6 good days and 1 bad day. Well, that doesn't make sense because your nerves and your action potentials and your energy moving down it based on the growth of that neurological lipid layer on the nerve can't change that quickly. So then what happens? Phosphatidylserine is taken as a good lipid to actually help regenerate nerves. Now, it's really funny. Let's ask Mark, because Mark's here in studio with me. Us older generation people here today. Now, older generation, we're still darn young, but the idea is this. Here's what happens. And it's just so interesting that the greatest source of phosphatidylserine, Mark, could you give me any idea, just knowing me and you know what I love to eat, what do you think could be a great source of this? Actually, it's the highest source of it.
That you love to eat?
That I love to eat.
Sugars?
No sugars. Now you can find out that actually drains that. Okay, here's what happens. Organ meats, liver, heart, kidney, and guess what else, guys? Brain. It's true. It's actually the highest source. Actually, the sad part is this. The highest source in a non-organ meat thing is actually soy, which, don't like soy, okay? And actually, the other source would actually be white beans. Last week when I talked about potassium, white beans has a good source that way. So a lot of you guys that don't eat organ meats, please don't eat soy, but you could get it from white beans, but a little worry about the sugar content there. Okay, so just kind of give you an example. So once again, there we are. Organ meats. It has been gone from our generation. Mark and I, for example, I think we are the last generation that really got this. My generation below 45 years old, man, if I say organ meats, people are like, ugh, you know what I'm saying? But it's true. Organ meats are massively regenerative to the brain. Do you ever notice that I'm always trying to get you guys on habitual things? What happens if you'd start some organ meats to give some regenerative aspect for the ingredients needed? Do you understand? Not a joke. If you look at what they have here, with the exception of ginkgo, you can almost get every one of these alternatives from organ meats. Think about that. You can almost get all of these with the exception of here from organ meats itself. I know, guys, trust me, you're like, Doc, I wish you had something better. Well, don't wrong. You can do certain supplementation. I'm going to show you that. But I'd rather get you on a food process. But organ meats were common, generations and generations ago. All right? So we become nutrient deficient in phosphatidylserine and other things that are there. Now watch. Here's what happens. And it's very important. Here's what goes on. Well, what starts to destroy those neuronal axes? What destroys those neuron bodies of actually nerves? Well, there's a major neurotransmitter that is by far the most excitatory thing in the body as far as that chemicals in that synapse, and it's called glutamate. Glutamate toxicity in neurodegenerative disease. What is the evidence? Well, they go through the fact that, once again, for you even to feel excitement, you need a certain amount of glutamate. But I want you to think about this. I actually love the movie The Matrix. And for my doctors watching, our theme for our May seminar and all of our practitioners that will be there from all over the world is going to be The Matrix. In the end of the third movie, once again, Neo turned into Mr. Smith. And what happened is you can see that he got the excitatory aspect of it and his light started to shine and it burst open. That's actually what happens to a neuron when there is too much glutamate. It actually will create, and this is the craziest part, an excess of glutamate will induce neuronal death. It creates apoptosis. That means an overexcitation of glutamate, an overabundance of it. But here's what happens, guys. Glutamate is produced internally. And here's a question. Put it in the comments below. Does anybody want to know the number one source of glutamate that's produced in the body, where it comes from? Put it in the comments below. I apologize, I can't see all of your comments when you do post live that way, but put it in the comments below. I'm just going to take a sip of my coffee to give you a second because a lot of the time it's delayed. Now, I want you to think about this. The number one source of glutamate for the body, believe it or not, is actually produced by our immune system when it's triggered by inflammation. Ooh. Chronic inflammation. Even the AARP came out and actually wrote this beautiful article that the Wellness Way docs have been screaming for over 20 years, is that inflammation is actually the start and inducer of every condition on the planet, from a swollen ankle to neurodegenerative disease. That means anytime that you trigger immune system, it can actually cause an overexcitation and production of glutamate that can now create neurological disease and cell death. Now, Doc, are you saying that's the only part? No. Let's look at this. Glutamate. Why does that sound familiar? As I said, glutamate is the most excitatory neurotransmitter of the body. For you to even have joy, there has to be a glutamate production that way. But guess what happens? Your food companies understand this too. And what they do is they actually use a synthetic glutamate that they put into your foods, and it's called MSG. See, MSG, they call it a flavor enhancer. No, it's not. It's a synthetic form of a neurotransmitter to stimulate your brain, to excite it. But that's why if you look, now watch this. Go to the MS website, the multiple sclerosis website. They actually tell you that if you have any neurological condition like that, please do not eat any artificial sweeteners or MSGs. Why? Because they induce glutamate and cause neurological death. So maybe your MS symptoms that they cannot find maybe some of your Parkinson's-based symptoms, maybe some of your Alzheimer's-based degeneration could be from your habitual patterns for a long period of time. And maybe since that it used to happen at a lot less rate when we were older, that our food sources of all this stuff over the last 20, 30 years this has become normal. And as you go to any Chinese restaurant, which is just full of MSG, or actually food allergies, or actually anything that induces glutamate that way causes and actually accelerates what? Degenerative aspects. So maybe a person that says, I have MS, and they have good and bad days, maybe you're irritated and damaging your nerves, and it's not really MS. The symptomatology feels like it that way, but you're actually causing induced cell death this way. Now, they studied this, the role of glutamate and NMDA receptors in Alzheimer's. It's quite interesting. The number one aspect and area of NMD receptors that are very sensitive to glutamate are right at the base of the skull. They actually show this. People that have correlation to the right at the base of the skull actually have a higher rate of neurological brain issues. It's why when a child gets adjusted, there is a better response to their brain. It's why, for example, when a person gets adjusted, it actually calms them receptors down. That's why chiropractic has done a wonderful job of looking at C1 between right below the skull, what our skull sits on, because if that is damaged, it can cause those things to fire. And that's why, for example, somebody that has a base of the skull headache sometimes can come from MSGs, food allergies, and it's not just their spine, but their spine alone can cause damage that affects your brain that way. See, the cool thing about removing all these triggers from spinal damage, subluxation, from MSGs, from other immune triggers that increase this, actually reduces the amount of neurodegenerative conditions. It's why instead of actually trying to alter plaque or trying to look at tangles, which I have no problem with doing, but we've been trying to do that now for 30 plus years and we are getting nowhere. It's time to have a different perspective on this. Now, here's what happens. And I said, Doc, you kind of talked about, for example, that the food sources and everything are changing. We're doing more processed foods, more MSGs. We have more immune triggers. But here's one thing that they also found. I looked at some of the other medical treatments for Alzheimer's that have actually gotten a little bit of change. And one thing that they're doing right now is actually an insulin nasal spray. What? They actually have a nasal spray mist. See, people don't realize this. Be very careful what you breathe. See, that's why I love essential oils. Essential oils, when you breathe it in through the nose, remember, the olfactory nerve is not a nerve. It's an extension of the brain. So whatever you breathe in hits your brain. It hits your brain. That's why, once again, there are certain essential oils that you can actually breathe in that are very neuroregenerative, that are very good for the brain. I know it sounds simple, but peppermint is still one of my favorite oils for the brain. Frankincense is still one of my favorite oils for the brain, because of this aspect. There is a neuroregenerative aspect to those things. And so when they spray insulin into the olfactory, into the brain, they're finding out that, once again, that insulin resistance and high sugar is causing some major degenerative aspects to the hippocampus, to the hypothalamus, and actually impairing its growth. And therefore, what they're finding is this, is when a person actually has insulin-like growth factor and the risk is Alzheimer's and brain atrophy, and this could be measured, and they found out that people that have low IGF factor 1 have a greater risk of neurodegenerative diseases that way, and actually this is a patient of ours. See, there's other factors that you can predict that can actually do that. So this insulin-like growth factor, once again, actually is lowered with insulin resistance, with sugar. See, the body actually needs sugar to run. And when it can't, it'll actually start to use ketones. That's why coconut oil or MCT oil, getting the fractionated aspect of the fats up to the brain, that's why ketosis has become so popular. But I will tell you this. And a lot of people, for example, have gotten this wrong, and I wouldn't mind having a debate on it. Guess what happens? your body always chooses sugar to run its brain, not ketones. Not ketones. It will use ketones. It will. And I'm not saying ketones are bad. I'm just saying you will get better mental clarity from actually good glucose than you will ketones. See, that's why I kind of giggle. And if the brain chooses, it will always choose glucose. It will use ketones as if it has to. But see, people are so sugared up that what ends up happening, the reason why people are getting such a great job with a ketogenic diet, and say, Doc, brain's clear is incredible. Yeah, because you're reducing insulin levels. So therefore, insulin resistance go down. Now we can start to actually build up IGF growth factor 1. And guess what happens? The brain's like, I get decent glucose. I can absorb it now with proper insulin levels that way. Guys, insulin resistance is devastating to the brain. It's actually shown to degenerate the hypothalamus, the cerebellum, the hippocampus. Because why? You lose your growth factors. You lose the growth factors that are meant for regeneration. So if this is left like this, guess what happens? It's going to be a bad day for this person. Is this person actually showing any kind of neurological conditions whatsoever? None. She's in her 30s yet. None. Well, the doc, why'd you use this? Because what can happen, it can start off as a mood change. It can start off as short-tempered. It can start off as you don't feel like yourself mentally. See, I didn't say forget your keys. I didn't say you drove to a different area. It starts off with other mood things that develop. That's why you're going to find, this is not a joke. You're going to find this out significantly. People that, for example, that have had a very rough life actually have more chance of Alzheimer's. They do. Because once again, that's why I'm so big into women, especially actually watching their mental stress, because it will lead to neurodegenerative aspects. This used to be dominated by men, it still is. But the amount of women suffering from Alzheimer's is greatly increasing. And that scares me. Because once again, the amount of anger, stress, all the things that are going on, the loss of estrogen levels, the loss of insulin-like growth factor, the amount of sugar they're eating, all lead to these degenerative aspects that when it hits you like a ton of bricks, it's moving in the wrong direction. And because our medical system doesn't think like this, even though they have a couple things on there that are so important. Now, next aspect. What else? We talked about those synapses and the different neurotransmitters. I'm going to cover one that I believe is essential for not only any regenerative aspect, but just even clear thought, thinking, memory, focus, all those things, and it's dopamine. See, one of the treatments that they use for Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, is a synthetic form of L-Dopa. Because if you, once again, L-Dopa in the body then will convert to dopamine, and the low dopamine levels actually lead to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's conditions and cause brain degeneration. And what's interesting is this, dopamine and dopamine-like receptors in Alzheimer's. They found out that low levels, they went through the whole thing, you can read it yourself that way, decreased levels of the neurotransmitter dopamine are linked with pathophysiologicals of Alzheimer's disease. Nonetheless, there is a clear need for prospective studies to validate these things. See, this is the stuff that we need to be studying. We need to be studying regenerative aspects, not degenerative aspects of going, well, we think it's the plaque, so we're just going to kind of do this. It's interesting because I'm going to show you a major controversy in medicine. You have two sides of medical doctors fighting like crazy when I get to one of the last aspects of causal factors of Alzheimer's and dementia. See, if you look at this, we need to think differently and go, okay, regeneration. So if you right now have somebody suffering badly from Alzheimer's, they're still alive. Start doing the regenerative things. There is hope. You can start to see some positive change. I'm not saying that you're going to regrow their brain. I'm just saying that we need to move them in the right direction. Because currently, according to every medical statistic, it's just a matter of time that they're going to continue to go down. And I've physically known people, and you know what, sad part is I need to take care of these people, but I physically know people that watch their mother look at them and have no freaking clue who they were. And they came and they cried. I can't even imagine that if I went and saw my mother, my dad, my uncle, a friend of mine, and walked in and they had no idea who they were, even though they've been with you for 60 plus years. It's devastating. So now, This is why we need to move in this way of regeneration. And once again, there's so much research on it. L-Dopa moderates motor cortex excitivity of Alzheimer's disease. That's why, once again, when they found out even giving the medication of L-Dopa, they had better motor skills. Now, what if we could do something that actually didn't have all the negative side effects and wasn't a synthetic chemical? Do you think it'd be worth it? Well, guess what? When I started studying all neurological regeneration, I came upon, actually it's called a velvet bean. It's so cool that actually in the herbal world calls it cohosh. But what happens is mucuna seed, and look what it talks about on WebMD. This is on WebMD, so you can just pull up on WebMD. So mucuna seed is actually the normal term. Cohosh and all the other names they have on it. But here's what happens. I want you to think about this. Watch this. Mucuna contains L-Dopa. Hold the phone. It contains levodopa. It's a velvet bean out there that exists in nature. I've always said God has created everything we need. Okay? Got to remember, medications, for example, are just synthetic patented chemicals that somebody can actually not let anybody else sell that alter the body. Remember, I mean this sincerely. God already made them. They're there. You just need to know what they are. But here's what happens, which is used to treat Parkinson's disease. I hate that they say that. I hate that. I hate that they say that. Let me say it again. See, they take everything natural. And instead of understanding to give it to the body on a regular basis to help with regeneration and actually producing dopamine and producing the things that we need, they use it like a treatment. That's why we fail in healthcare. Start looking from the carpenter perspective to keep the body good and keep it regenerating, and stop looking at everything like a fire and putting the fire out, because sometimes you get to it too late. Sometimes you can take mucuna, every medication in the world, and you're not changing everything because it's too late. Don't get there. Don't get there, but it has to change here. A different perspective is to change the what? Your thinking. And that's what we're doing today. L-Dopa is change in the chemical dopamine in the brain. Symptoms of Parkinson's disease occur when patients have low levels in the brain, okay? Most dopamine is broken down in the body before it ever reaches the brain, unless special chemicals are used in levodopa, and those chemicals are present in here. See what I'm saying? See, it gives you the delivery system. That's why I always laugh when people say, Doc, I'm going to take vitamin C. Well, you're not really taking vitamin C, you're taking ascorbic acid. What does that mean? Ascorbic acid is a fraction of vitamin C, and all the other parts in there are needed for that aspect to even work, okay? So the cool thing about having food sources, so let's go back to this. How many factors in organ meats do you know actually have that we don't even know exist yet? There's so many factors that it takes for digestion, assimilation, get to parts of the body that are in that food alone. Compared to if you just take one little microfraction and put it into a supplement, or one little chemical and put it into a medication and chemically alter it that way. Doesn't make any sense to me. The whole food form, that's why I love herbs. They come in whole food form. You extract all that stuff from a liquid form that way, so it can assimilate beautiful. All right? Now, it's kind of neat. So if you look, get this, here we go. What actually, Doc, then can cause some degenerative aspects? And this is where I want to kind of get to. That is controversial in the medical world, and they have two camps of medicine fighting. As you look at the things about what are good for the brain, essential fatty acids, coconut oil, all these things, remember, your brain uses more cholesterol than any organ in the body. Let me say it again. Your brain uses more cholesterol than any organ in your body, and every tissue cell is made of cholesterol. See, so this idea of that, I mean, it's time to say this. If any doctor tells you that cholesterol is bad for you, please run away from them. Run, because they have no idea. Well, Doc, you're saying you want my cholesterol at 400? I didn't say I wanted 400. I'm saying there's a reason why it's at 400. And actually, statistically, there's so much research shows that the higher your cholesterol levels go as you get older, the less neurological disease and degeneration you have. Because statins actually do what? Statins limit the amount of cholesterol in circulation, because it's not a cholesterol drug, it's a liver drug, and it interferes with the transport of cholesterol through our system, and now it doesn't get here. But here's where the controversy is. People say, well, Doc, but here's what happens. If there's less cholesterol, then the chance of plaquing goes down. Plaquing happens when cholesterol oxidizes. Oxidation happens when there's chronic inflammation with a lot of cholesterol in the system. It's not cholesterol. You're chronically inflamed, and guess what happens? We've reduced cholesterol in our heart for 70 years, and heart disease continues to go up because even if there's a little cholesterol and a ton of inflammation, this organ will degenerate. Well, guess what's happening right here? Right here. So the idea that you're going to slow plaquing down, they say, yes, let's give statins for Alzheimer's. And you have a bunch of them going, no, guess what? They've actually found that if you look at even the negative side effects of, this is from drugs.com, from actually Lipitor and all cores, all statin-based drugs, cognitive impairment, memory loss, forgetfulness impaired, memory impairment. And this is actually from drugs.com on the side effects of statin drugs. So do you think maybe all these statin drugs that we've given out 70 years is some of the contributors? You bet your butt it is. They say it is. They talk about it. Yeah, you have some camp people saying, well, we want to reduce plaque, so we're going to give a statin because it can reduce some plaque. Sure, but plaquing doesn't actually forego that you're going to have Alzheimer's disease. Look at the Nun Study and other studies showing that plaquing, once again, can be a risk factor. I'm not saying it can't. I'm not saying tingling can't contribute to it. I'm just saying if you're basing everything on plaque and you're going to use a statin and try to reduce plaque, guess what happens? You're also degenerating the brain by doing this. You're reducing the brain by doing this. You are causing degeneration to the brain. You're causing it. That's why these are the negative side effects of it. Cognitive impairment, memory loss, forgetfulness, and memory impairment. Do you understand that your basic medical doctor, well, actually most medical doctors have no idea about this? None. Why do you think essential fatty acids in coconut oil and other fat-based things, for example, are actually good for the brain? And they have them for them. Yet people are continuing to act like fats are bad. Well, doc, if that cholesterol oxidizes, it can cause plaquing for the heart and the brain. Yes, but what does that take? Inflammation. That's why, well, inflammation also creates glutamate that also causes brain degeneration. Why don't we actually have a wellness way approach to inflammation? Because it helps all the body, and be a carpenter doctor that can be regenerative. I wish we did that. That's the basis for everything that we do here and stuff. So yes. So as I'm looking for all you guys that are here right now, thank you guys for popping on. Here we go. So I want you to think about this. So as we look at this, now are there other factors that can do this? Yes, and yes. Now everything I've given you, everyone I give you, I want you to think about this. Statin drugs, inflammation, all these factors. My personal opinion, let me say it again, my personal opinion. I want to say this first so you guys know it's an opinion, all right? Because remember, I'm very clear about anatomy and physiology. It's non-negotiable. People understand. You can read from my book that way. But I'm going to give you a personal opinion on this. I believe that aluminum is probably the greatest contributor to Alzheimer's, to MS, to Parkinson's, because the amount of toxicity and the amount of damage it causes neurological cells is immeasurable. It's actually massively generated in all heavy metals. It's why, for example, don't you find this funny? They talk about that if you actually have Alzheimer's, don't use antiperspirants because there's aluminum in there. Don't use aluminum cookware. Don't drink from aluminum cans. And it's really funny, when they actually try to talk about it in all the other societies, they talk about aluminum metals, but they talk about copper, zinc, and iron. Copper and zinc and iron metals are actually needed on a regular basis. Aluminum is not. But I love how they classify to show that, oh, well, if we study metals and they talk about copper, yes, you can have copper toxicity, but copper is needed even for hormonal balance. Aluminum is not. But here's what happens. Aluminum itself, even if you avoid, guess what? Cookware, cans, antiperspirants. Do you understand? The number one thing that dominates in aluminum is the flu shot and other vaccines. You think that we're not having massive neurodegeneration in kids and other factors from these things being injected into you don't understand the brain. This is quite probably, in my opinion, the biggest neurological damaging aspect of all things, from childhood neurological diseases to Alzheimer's, MS, and everything that way. They're injecting massive psychotic amounts that would be illegal and actually detrimental to come in contact with what? In an environment. So when they talk about environmental factors, because they do talk about there are environmental factors that can actually cause brain degeneration and dementia and Alzheimer's, and aluminum is listed as one of them. Yet you never actually see on their website about avoiding the flu shot, which is by far the highest concentration there is. See, is that my opinion? Yes, my opinion based on what I believe probably the number one causal factor is. But it's not my opinion on what it does to the brain and what it does to all of our neurological system throughout our body, not just our brain. Everything from our tips of our fingers, everything from our tips of our toes, everything from actually our sciatic nerve. Heck, that's why if you ever look, some of the major side effects are neurological problems that way. So what can we do? How can we start? Number one, avoid aluminum and all heavy metals. Do everything you possibly can to keep these neural degenerative effects away from you. Your brain does not do well. Those axons, those myelin sheaths, those phosphatidylserine, all those lipids, it's massively damaging to them that way. Don't do it, okay? No MSGs. Guys, everything I'm gonna show you up here is choice. You control it. See, that's the cool thing about everything I teach you. You control it. You do. This is your aspect, what you can do with it that way. Number three, reduce your sugars. Keep insulin resistance down. Sugar, such high levels of sugar is so bad for the brain. Avoid statins. Eat organ meats, please. Once again, organ meats are even sometimes cheaper than vegetables. You know why? Nobody wants to eat them. Do you know why kale's so cheap? Because nobody likes it. That's why I buy it by the bushels full to make my kale chips. And if it didn't make it into kale chips, I don't like kale, but kale chips taste pretty darn good. We have a recipe on the website. But so I love kale and I love organ meats. Why? So your food budget can go down. It can go down. Doc, I can't afford healthy food. Really? Kale's cheap, organ meat's cheap. Go eat it. Well, I don't really like it. Can you give me a gluten-free cookie that costs $7? See, eating healthy gets really expensive when you try to make what you do into what you already eat. Doc, I want a gluten-free cookie. Sure, they're $4. I can get an Oreo for 3 cents. It's difference. Reduce inflammation. It's why every office across the world for 20 years has been talking about the wellness way approach to inflammation. From a carpenter perspective of how to be regenerative, find the trigger, stop putting the house on fire, because sometimes the fire's too bad. The fire's too bad. And if you have a person that, for example, is in the late stages of Alzheimer's, they're being made no chance whatsoever. Even if you try to regenerate, don't get there. Reduce inflammation. Reduce it. Please do that. All right? Mucuna. I'm telling you right now, guys, I take this on a daily basis. I'm going to always feed my brain what it needs. That's what it comes down to. I take it in pill form. I used to have it taken in powder form, my smoothie that way, but I took it in pill form because I was just taking so many powders. Now, coconut oil. Ginkgo, we didn't talk much about this, but it was actually on the website. It was actually on the Alzheimer's website. Ginkgo is actually the #1 vasodilator herb to get to the cortex of the brain. See, when we're under fight or flight and stress and non-growth, we don't get a lot of blood flow to the cortex of the brain. Ginkgo does that. That's why Ginkgo is known for memory. Well, it's really more known for regeneration and actually getting blood flow to the brain, to the cortex of the brain. That's why I love Ginkgo. I love Ginkgo. I think it's one of the greatest herbs on the planet that way too. It's not my favorite. It's probably number 10 on my favorite list that way. But I do love Ginkgo from that aspect, and that's why it is on their website. Number 11, keep your brain active from an exercise standpoint. But you know what they contribute to the Nun Study to? The Nun Study said the reason why they believe that the nuns lived so long and lived great, even though that they actually had plaquing in the brain and had tangles, was the fact that they were always learning something new. They were always keeping their brain stimulated, and therefore that kept their cognitive ability, their regeneration better. Guys, you ever notice this? Do you ever notice that sometimes when people retire, they die shortly after? Because their brain is no longer in a learning aspect. Because things are good. Money's good. I worked hard. I want a break. It's going to sound funny. Once again, there is an old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. You need to keep that brain active. Please do me a favor. Learn something new. Constantly read. See, I don't sit in front of the TV and actually just stare at it and laugh. I'm always reading. I'm always learning. I'm always doing something. That's why I feel at 45, I feel more sharp than I ever have than anyone when I was in my 20s. Actually, when I was a little kid, I asked my mom, I couldn't learn anything because I had those problems up there. Now I'm a sponge constantly, and that's why I bring this to you all the time. But constantly be learning. Please read. Please do anything you can to learn something new. It activates and grows the brain. These things are so simple. But that's what happens. That's why I watched that TED Talk this morning. This woman said, the only way I see Alzheimer's doing is when we have a preventive medication that you'll start in your early years. Really? Really? That's your biggest thing, to start some synthetic chemical, some patented drug way before? Why don't we understand it? Well, Doc, she's from some major university and medical school that way. I don't care. Guess what? All the medical schools also told you to take statins. All the current doctors still believe cholesterol is bad for you. We need a different level of thinking. And our ideas, no joke, guys, are starting to travel all over the world. Because you know why? Because here's what happens. I will continue to bring you this kind of different way of thinking till the day I die. I thank God for media. And if they don't do it by media, I'll just travel around and teach everybody. If Facebook and Google and everything start to suppress everything like they're doing, there's other ways of communication. Remember, I'll deliver it by pigeons if I have to. Because here's what happens. Our information is spreading all over the world. We now, actually it's kind of cool, we now actually even have international offices. If you're a doc practicing overseas, you can practice just like this. You can do all these things. We now have an office in Ireland. I get to go there to see the docs over there. So what happened is Dr. Laura and Dr. Thomas, that's where they originally practiced. And now we actually have it into a wellness way that way in Ireland over in Galway. I'm going over there February 24th or 3rd, I think it is, whatever the day after our women's event is. Okay. And then what happens is then I'm actually going over to Sweden because Dr. Thomas and I are going to be speaking over there. And Dr. Thomas and I also be speaking to a bunch of doctors over there. See, the messages that we have apply everywhere. Why? Because the dominant thinking of healthcare conditions is everywhere. Heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, MS, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, cancer, everything. Everywhere we go across the world, they're continuing to go up. Why? Because of this, the way everybody thinks. And we need to change that. It's why we do certain events. It's why actually we have offices now all over. And once again, I'm hoping that we spread like crazy, and I believe we will. Because our information is impacting people based on clinical results. See, your doctor can even agree with what I say, but guess what? Let's see who gets the better clinical results. The Wellness Way is spreading across the country, not just because you're thinking different, because the results follow. I built my whole career just based on women's health. Mine. Now, always take care of it. You say, Doc, I'm a patient of yours and you were a guy. I'm a guy. Yes. But what happens, I just love the female realm. It was always easier for me to understand and pick out their physiology different than any doctor did in the world. And that's why we constantly train in these things. Now, speaking of having women, we have a women's event that's coming up. I think it's, Mark, what is it? It's 23rd or 22nd, whatever that Saturday is of February. The 22nd of February, okay? You can go to summit.thewellnessway.com. It's the Wellness Way Summit. We have all great female speakers. Woman that was on The Bachelor, a fantastic female pastor here from Life Church. Actually, our own very special Nicole. We also have a fantastic businesswoman here that actually created a non-toxic, awesome skincare makeup line. She actually started from scratch, and now it's an international brand. I'm so proud of her. She's here in Green Bay. And they're going to share their journeys and things like that. And here's the cool thing is this. The only time that the only guys that will be there will be me and the other guy docs, and we're going to be there taking care of you, having some fun. But also we're doing a little thing during lunch. But otherwise, it's all female speakers. But the one thing I want to share was this. A lot of people say, Doc, I would love to hang out with you, and I'd like to see all things go on and hang out with Chrissy. Well, here's our gem. We have a huge giveaway that we're doing. And just by doing this, it already started this past Monday, if you haven't seen it yet. If you like and share my videos, you have to like them, have to share them. You go into the drawing, and we will pull it on February 1st. We are going to pull a name, and you're going to be able to bring you and another female. So a female is going to win. You and another female to the event. We will fly you into Green Bay. You will stay at my house and live with us for the weekend. My wife, me, and my kids. And we have a bunch of the female doctors. Dr. Stephanie Tilden, Dr. Courtney Mosley. I think Dr. Michelle is coming in, and a bunch of other ones, and they're all staying at my house. Then we're having a VIP party on Saturday night with the speakers, and our docs and the winners are staying at my house. And we're having an amazing party with great organic food, great organic setup, great atmosphere, great people. And on Sunday, I have to fly out then to Ireland. I don't think it's the afternoon, but then Sunday, we'll have you guys hang out, have some breakfast with us, and then we'll ship you back to where you flew into. Okay? So the cool thing is this, the giveaway, actually all you have to do to enter, it costs you nothing. All you have to do is if you believe in what I'm sharing with you, if you believe with what the Wellness Way doctors are sharing with you, do me a favor, like and share this. If you like and share it, my media team sees all of that. They'll go through all the shares, they'll write your name down, you go into a drawing. We did this last time, and it was a trip to Hawaii. And Janelle, who's probably on right now, actually she won it. I paid for her and her husband, for her flights, hotels, everything out there. It was kind of good. We had an amazing time, okay? Because we like to live life together, people. So come live a weekend with me. You can look at my house. You can look at how it's built non-toxically. You can actually look at all our foods, all our clean products. You can look at our towels being organic cotton. You can look at our sheets being organic, non-toxic cotton, pills that don't off-gas, everything. That's our lifestyle we live because I take inflammation very seriously. It's why every office across the world that we own actually says what? The Wellness Way approach to inflammation. Dr. Laura and I had a conversation just on Thursday when I was traveling home from Minneapolis with my headset on. I don't have my phone on and do it when I do it. And she's like, Doc, it's so exciting. Ireland is having its first inflammation talk, and it's packed 2 weeks before actually it even is. They can't hold any more people. I was excited, but I was also saddened. I was saddened that the world is getting sicker and sicker, that our seminars are getting bigger and bigger. I know it sounds funny. I wish no one had to come into a Wellness Way, because by the time they get here, they've already been to doctors all over the country, sometimes all over the world, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, a lot of suffering, a lot of tears, a lot of emotions, sometimes even divorce. And finally, they come into one of our docs. And you wonder why I'm so passionate about this. You wonder why our doctors are so passionate about this. Sit in our shoes one day and watch a woman sitting across from you crying because she was told she could never have a child. Crying because their mom doesn't recognize them anymore because they have Alzheimer's. Crying because their 6-year-old child has cancer and they told him he's going to die. And all those things happened in the Green Bay office in the last 2 weeks. But they happen in every office. I don't want to see that. That's why I will sit here every Saturday morning. That's why I'll be on media, articles, videos, everything, every week till God takes me home. God bless you guys. I appreciate you. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn. Thank you so much for watching A Different Perspective. Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream. Also, share this video with a friend. Once again, thank you for watching.